Welcome to NARAL's The Morning After. Each Thursday, our podcast brings you the latest on reproductive health care, progressive politics, and the fight to keep abortion safe and legal. NARAL's The Morning After is a production of NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at ProChoiceOH. Enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm Gabe.
Hi, I'm Vashitta.
Hey, I'm Kellie.
How's it going?
You know, living the dream one nightmare at a time.
Right. Yeah, we haven't podcasted for a couple weeks now. A lot's happened. We wanted to start off this episode on a sad note. Over the Labor Day weekend, we were very heartbroken to learn that we'd lost a terrific activist, organizer, a great person. Her name is Adrienne Gavula. She was working for ACLU as a field organizer, but she was much more than just this one job. Kellie, you know her.
Gosh, and have had the privilege to work with her and be her friend for more than a decade. She was very committed to reproductive rights, to abortion access, and worked on so many issues. She was only 35 when she passed in a car accident. It came as a real shock to the whole community. Adrienne was the person that you could count on to come out and be there for whatever was needed. She was out in the bitter cold with us, holding up signs, holding the Ohio Senate accountable. In December and January when most people wouldn't come out. She was just always there and always had a smile and was always ready to keep fighting. And she is going to be so missed. We attended a memorial service for her. And, they often say that it was a hokey thing that they read at some funerals. I didn't read it this one, but they talk about the year you're born and the year you died, and the dash in between is what really matters. In Adrienne's case, when you saw the people who gathered in the room to celebrate her life, it was just incredible. The community that she had built, that she'd been a part of, and the lives that she had touched and made better. And it was a life cut short, but a life well lived and a life of service. And we will miss her very much.
Yeah. There's a terrific tribute to Adrienne that her coworkers at the ACLU put together. We'll put a link in the show notes. It talks about the various roles that she played working with the ACLU, advocating for people with disabilities, the incarcerated. She was a terrific social worker. And the head of our, for some time, the head of our Freedom of Choice Ohio Coalition. The one thing that always stuck out in my mind when I thought about the work that she did, we were fighting against defunding Planned Parenthood back in 2013. And there was a bunch of people that testified, and there was, a lot of testimony that, hey, Planned Parenthood's good, and then, hey, Planned Parenthood's bad. And you just sort of heard the same thing over and over again. When Adrienne stepped up to the microphone, she presented testimony that explained to the members of the committee in very plain language, what would happen if they took those funds away and then provided them to, medical providers who weren't set up to actually serve those patients with the same type of care. If they didn't have gynecological services and you gave it to some general health clinic. And she stepped up and said that, listen, if you give this money to these various clinics, they're going to put it into different infrastructure projects, and none of it's going to be spent on patient care directly the way that it is at Planned Parenthood. And it was a great point. I was sitting there listening to all of this testimony. I was tweeting as I do. And I just sort of stopped and froze. I thought, the way she explained that just now was a point that hadn't been said by any other witness, including the Planned Parenthood staff or the attorneys that were looking at this. And she did it in a way that everyone in the room got what she meant. She had a terrific understanding of the entire situation that was going on. She knew it front to back, and she knew how to talk about it. It was really amazing. Only somebody, with some wisdom was able to do that. So she'll be very sorely missed.
those who would like to honor her last wishes, we encourage you to visit the website of Women Have Options and make a donation in her honor and her memory.
Yeah, I didn't know Adrienne personally, but the way you guys describe her, I know she was amazing, an amazing person who did some great work here in Ohio. And so, my heart goes out to her family and friends.
Yeah. Okay. So from that, we move forward. Over the past 2 weeks, we've been very active, especially fighting to protect Toledo's last abortion clinic, Capital Care. They've got a terrific volunteer corps up there working as clinic escorts, volunteering outside the clinic because they have such a rabid group of protesters that are constantly harassing them. The clinic escorts saw what we did here in Columbus, Columbus City Council passing a clinic protection ordinance last year, right. And they loved that idea and jumped on it right away, took that idea straight to City Council. City Council's had their attorneys look at it. They thought the idea was great too, and it's been introduced. City Council has now had their first hearing. That happened on August 30th. So we got to hear the various discussions for and against the idea of a new law in Toledo that says that, hey, you're allowed to stand outside an abortion clinic. You can pray, you can talk, you can distribute your pamphlets, but you're not allowed to walk up and harass somebody. You're not allowed to get in their face and make threats and forms of intimidation and block the entrance. And if people do that, then there's going to be legal penalties.
Right. Well, and I think, of the witnesses who testified, they talked about the reason why something like this is necessary. Sometimes opponents say, well, there's laws. I mean, there's the Federal FACE Act. Well, do you know what it's like to try to get federal charges against a protester?
Right.
It's not a small, inconsequential thing. And protesters at the Toledo clinic, they're doing the same sorts of things that we've seen in Columbus, where they were following patients, to their cars, accosting them in the parking lot across the street from the clinic and following them so that they, felt unsafe. And I've seen video of protesters actually peering into the window of the clinic because the clinic is right on the sidewalk.
Right.
The purpose of this legislation is really to de-escalate the situation before anyone does get hurt or anything violent does happen. No one's trying to say that somebody doesn't have their First Amendment right to protest. I mean, as a third-generation union member, I've been on many a picket line, and
right.
I've had a thing or two to say. I'll be honest.
So this basically goes beyond the whole freedom of speech amendment, and just people saying that this is their constitutional right.
Yeah, that is not being impinged upon. This is really about giving the local law enforcement a way to clarify, that you can't accost people and follow them and frighten them to try to prevent them from accessing healthcare. That's how it's very different from the claims that the opponents make.
Yeah.
Right. When we were talking about this last year, as Columbus City Council was considering this, they were listening to the testimony from it's the same situation. A lot of the clinic escorts, volunteers who are outside the clinics every single day, listening to the sort of things that these protesters are saying. And the idea of it being a First Amendment issue is frequently discussed. That's what the topic was back then. This is basically just the same arguments all over again. What I said then is, the big example that I think originated in a Supreme Court case long ago is that you're allowed to say whatever you want, but you're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. And what these protesters outside clinics are doing isn't yelling fire in a crowded theater, but they're walking up to someone and saying, you are going to burn, and threatening them in that way.
Oh, yeah.
That is not protected free speech.
Not at all.
So, you're not allowed to threaten people. And that's what we're saying. You're still allowed to be out there praying and, pamphlets and whatever you want to do. No threats. Very simple.
I will point out that the U.S. Supreme Court does have its own buffer zone.
Right.
Oops.
A nice big buffer zone too.
Yeah.
So the council discussed a
Long hearing.
very long hearing, over 4 hours of council discussion and testimony.
And our communications man, Mr. Man, he Facebook Live that. Bravo.
He was
Yeah,
ready to go
amazing
home at
job.
any point in time.
I did once hear him snicker at somebody's comments.
So council discussed it. They talked about the opinions that they'd gotten from their lawyers.
Right.
The president of city council is the member who's introduced. He's the sponsor of this ordinance. He's had the city's attorneys look at it. They, I think, have come to the same conclusions as the city of Columbus's attorneys. You know, it's a solid piece of legislation. Then the council heard from a panel of proponents, some clinic escorts, some clinic staff, and our own Jamie Miracle,
Yay.
who, you know, sat there in panel and explained exactly why this is a good idea. Then they heard from opponents. So your, usual band of suspects, all the Right to Life folks had a panel. And then for like the next 2.5 hours,
A long time.
called up witnesses
After
from
witness,
the audience,
After witness. After witness.
one by one by one. The most remarkable point that happened, I thought, was you had several patients and staff talking
Mhm.
about the kind of harassment that had happened,
Yeah.
including writing down license plate numbers
Yeah.
in the parking lot.
Taking pictures of their
Very
cars.
excessive type of harassment.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there's zero reason when I go to my doctor's office that anybody should write down my license plate number.
Right.
Right.
And so we heard this from several people. They write down my license plate number. They were recording which cars come in and out. And there was several protesters that were like, these are all made up lies. These are exaggerations. Nobody's doing this. We're not writing down license plate numbers. And then this little old lady steps up. I write down the license numbers.
We're like, we know.
Because
Thank you for telling everyone.
I'm like, did that just
Exactly.
happen?
Yes.
Yes, it did.
Oh. We had an admission
Wow.
from the lady who writes down the license plate numbers, and she explained that she likes to keep track of the cars that go in and out. That's a form of harassment.
Yeah,
There's
that
no
is not
reason
okay.
to write down someone's license plate number if you're not going to intimidate them.
Well, they call themselves sidewalk counselors, and I'm like, aha. And in what way is this counseling?
Yeah.
Right.
More
Are you
emotional
accredited?
abuse. Right.
Like,
Very
Right.
weird, I guess, usage of the word counseling.
yeah. Quotes, if you can't see me.
Air quotes.
My understanding is that counseling brings with it a legal connotation. So a clinic can't say that they offer counseling if they don't have someone that is a qualified counselor.
Right.
So if you're standing
Absolutely.
out there on the sidewalk saying that you're counseling, no, you're really not. It's not a subject of opinion. It's an actual
Exactly.
legal point.
Well, and to your point about other forms of healthcare, what other place has people standing outside, offering counseling, and and these places, these protesters, they're affiliated with crisis pregnancy centers that we know often lie to women about abortion and the risks and supposed links to breast cancer and these things. And I'm like, well, you advertise if someone wants to come talk to you. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like you're hard to find.
Right.
But somehow, no, they're going to have to talk to me. They're going to have to listen to
Right.
me because I'm going to follow them. I'm going to accost them at their car when they're trying to get out of the parking lot. That's not counseling.
Right.
That's harassment. And that's what this legislation is really about.
Right.
Absolutely. Or if somebody is walking up to the clinic and they don't want to talk, you can't continue to force them. That's harassment. If they don't want to
Mhm.
talk, I think you should just move on and leave that person alone, not follow them, not scream at them, not write down their license plate number.
Right. And I mean, you do it to be creepy. I mean, why else
Yeah,
do you do that? Why
absolutely.
is she keeping track of it?
Right.
Exactly.
This little old
Yeah,
lady.
that is really creepy. I would be really creeped out and trying
Yeah.
to figure out why my license plate number is being written down.
I mean, there are some protesters out there, that kind of give me the creeps,
Go
give me the
overboard.
willies. I would not have
Yeah.
expected it from this little old lady that stepped up. Well, I do this.
We were just talking about, our Cleveland office is in an abortion clinic in preterm. And, I've walked past protesters for the 14 years that we've had an office in there. And it's sometimes the little old man, the little old lady who really comes up with the most frightening thing. Just because somebody is older or small doesn't mean that they're not dangerous. I mean, the person who vandalized the Planned Parenthood clinic in Columbus was an older woman.
Right.
And she used a biblical phrase as a death threat on the building.
Right.
And so we know how you probably feel walking in there, but we can just imagine how bad it is for those who are actually patients and already going through a whirlwind of emotions, and they're having to deal with this. So
it's very difficult. We at preterm, patients can write in the journals, and they write about that. They talk about how upsetting it is. For a lot of patients, that's their first time that maybe they're ever having to have a procedure, that they might ever have anesthesia. They're thinking about all those things about their personal safety. And then all of a sudden somebody's, banging on their car window, shoving, materials into their window if it's open, following them. I mean, it wouldn't be tolerated anywhere else, and it shouldn't be tolerated in an abortion clinic.
Absolutely.
That's right. So that ordinance continues to get some review. Today is election day up in Toledo. So members of the, yes, by the time you're hearing this, is probably over. But
vote again in November.
Members of City Council, of course, this being a local election year, are concentrating on that right now, which we expect them to. So as the council kind of works through their legislative year, they'll continue to look at this. There was some great points by City Council that they're very interested in seeing how Columbus has rolled this out. There was even one point where one of the Toledo council members said, "Hey, I'm going to go down to Columbus. I'm going to stand outside the clinic. I'm not going to make this like an announced event. I just want to go, with my own eyes and ears and see how things happen there, and just sort of get that first-person experience that you honestly can't get in the middle of a city council meeting when everybody on both sides comes up to present their best argument. That's not how things happen out on the sidewalk."
Right.
And so they really want to see how it is there on the street, which is terrific. So they're going to take some time to review this, and we hope that we'll be able to, have them come back and put this to a vote, because the city of Toledo really needs it.
Yeah, they sure do.
Yeah. So the next topic on the agenda is Toledo.
Toledo.
Right.
All roads right now for abortion access in Ohio lead to Toledo.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot going on there. So
yeah. We're all dressed up. Those of you just listening in the podcast can't tell, but we've got our finery on.
I did my hair.
Our Sunday best.
Yeah. Our Sunday best for Tuesday's worst. Today is a loaded day. This morning we heard oral arguments in the case being brought by the same clinic, Toledo's only clinic, Capital Care. They are challenging John Kasich's transfer agreement rules that his health department has used in a very political set of attacks on abortion providers to try and shut down that clinic and leave really the entire Northwest Ohio quadrant of the state without a provider.
Right. Toledo only has one abortion provider because these provisions already forced the other clinic in Toledo to close. And what this case is being held in front of the Ohio Supreme Court, the state is asking the Ohio Supreme Court to overturn the lower court rulings, which said, yeah, this stuff is not constitutional, that you cannot treat abortion clinics differently from other ambulatory surgical facilities and make requirements of them that are not medically necessary. And I think what's interesting about what's happening here in Ohio is, although it's not identical to what happened in Texas, it's the same sort of a scheme where anti-choice politicians get control of the state government, and then they use that or abuse that power to create regulations that are not designed to improve women's health, but are designed to be used to close abortion clinics. And that's what's happening here. And Jennifer Branch, a real hero for the pro-choice movement in the state, her and her law partner, Al Gerhardstein, They have ably, worked this case through the court system, which has agreed with them every step of the way. And the state has now had to go to the court of last resort for them, which is the Ohio Supreme Court, to try to overturn what all of the lower courts have said, which is this regulatory scheme is not appropriate. This clinic should be able to remain open. And the issue at hand is something called transfer agreements.
So I don't think a lot of people realize what a transfer agreement is and what
I know
does.
It's like everything they do. It sounds like totally legit. It's like a sidewalk counselor. Well, that sounds fine, except for when one's screeching at you and shoving things in your car.
Right.
Transfer agreements are kind of the regulatory version of that. What it says is that if you operate an ambulatory surgical facility, you have to have a contract or a piece of paper with a hospital that says that if you need to transfer a patient to the hospital, that you can do that without having to go to the emergency room. It's kind of a continuity of care. And of course, that makes a lot of sense for an ambulatory surgical facility that has to transfer a lot of people because of complications. But in abortion care, the complication rate is exceedingly low, less than 0.5%. And even those complications, very few require additional care at a hospital. Right. So they said, okay, well, abortion clinics can't get those agreements from public hospitals because, of course, that's where many of them were getting them.
Right.
So all the other ambulatory surgical facilities can get them, in Toledo's case, from the University of Toledo Medical Center, but not the abortion clinics.
Right.
And that's when the trouble started, because now the state is like, well, why don't you have a transfer agreement? It's like, well, why I don't have one, because you said I couldn't get one from the place I always got one.
Right.
And then so they get one. They get one from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, because none of the other local hospitals wanted to get involved because they don't want to be part of this controversy and have protesters outside their hospitals and all this kind of stuff. And so they get one from the University of Michigan, and then the state goes, nah, we're gonna put a mile limit on that so that we make that illegal too. And so every time these clinics meet the bar, the state changes it.
Right.
And this stuff only applies to the abortion clinics. And then people with the anti-choice groups or the state, they come out and they say, well, they're not adhering to the same rules as everyone else. It's like, well, that's because they're not the same rules as everyone else. It's one of the worst abuses of government authority I think I've seen, where they go under the guise that this is a regulation to protect women's health. Yeah. But if they're successful, if they close this clinic, where are the 850 women on average a year who seek abortion care at Capital Care in Toledo? Where will they go?
Right.
What about the women who, because Ohio has a 24-hour waiting period?
Yeah.
You have to go twice. You have to get child care because 60% of the women who have abortions already have kids, time off of work, transportation. So if you can't get that in Toledo, if you can't, where are you going to go? Michigan? Cleveland, Columbus, can you get there?
Yeah, absolutely.
What about the women who can't?
Exactly.
Can you get there twice?
Right, absolutely.
In Ohio's case.
Not just a transportation thing, but also a funding thing, because you also have to fund your abortion. So
yeah, thanks to the Hyde Amendment.
Exactly. So this is just more money on top of what you already have to pay, trying to get to where you're going.
That's such a good point.
Well, from the point of view of a resident of Columbus, we have 2 abortion clinics. They're serving Central Ohio and, all the people that come in from the surrounding area. They're pretty much at capacity right now.
Yeah.
If you are scheduling a procedure, there's, you're not going to be able to come in, that day or the next day. You're going to have some amount of wait. I don't know exactly what that is, but it's going to be something.
Yeah.
If everybody from, the southern half of Toledo starts coming down to Columbus, I've always likened it to, we have 8 clinics across Ohio. What if we only had 8 dentist offices? And imagine if all 11 million people had to rely on those 8 dentist offices. You'd never get an appointment.
Well, and we had 16 clinics back in 2011.
Right.
And people are going to extraordinary measures to travel, to get to clinics. I think that the real difficulty if the Toledo clinic closes is it would be the first time we've lost a whole metropolitan area. And I think that's when we're really going to see this capacity issue become a problem. As other clinics have closed, local clinics have been able to kind of absorb that, adjust their practice, maybe be able to add some hours, those sorts of things. But I think we're very near the tipping point.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary. I mean, it would definitely be an overload for other clinics and other cities. And so it would be a pretty big devastation to the community of Toledo.
Which is why we love Jennifer Branch for championing this clinic.
Absolutely.
and going into that state Supreme Court, which is packed with justices who, let's face it, they're elected officials. Many of them have been endorsed by anti-choice organizations. One of them even spoke at the breakfast of one of the anti-choice organizations in Toledo and refused to recuse herself.
Right.
That's a tough room, but we hope that they'll rise above their
Jennifer
bias.
Branch and her law partner have tackled high-profile cases before in the past, so I definitely know.
Tell our listeners about that. What one they might have heard of?
Yeah, I'm sure. So in the LGBTQ community, they overheard the case of
Obergefell.
Yes, I should have known that. I had the picture with him. The case of his partner dying and him not able to. I believe it was he wanted to have some type of rights with his exactly. And I guess at the time that wasn't a thing, and so he challenged that. Was the first to do so, and actually became very well known for that. And
it was the case that legalized same-sex marriage across the country, and it said, oh yeah, the 14th Amendment. Oh yeah, everyone has equal protection under the law. That thing. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get around to that now.
So you wanted to give Jennifer Branch that's what she said of the day.
I love her.
She is an amazing woman. So
yeah,
total badass.
The arguments this morning started off with questions to the state, which were followed by Jennifer Branch's her argument. One of the biggest points that was a little bit surprising was how much the justices really wanted to hear about how the undue burden rule comes into effect here. So Jennifer, she provided clarification because they were asking her, why didn't you make this argument?
Because the case started before Whole Women's Health. Right.
As this case has gone on, we've been dealing with this so long that federal case law has changed, and that everyone's now crystal clear understanding of what constitutes an undue burden comes from Ruth Bader Ginsburg's her decision in the Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstedt case that we won in DC. And so now that the case is continued, the legal precedent has changed. And so the court can decide to include that, as lower courts did. The Sixth Circuit included that in their decision. Right. It was the very first time here in Ohio that we heard a judge referencing Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstedt. It was the case that's keeping Toledo's doors open this very day.
Well, and to summarize very simply what Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the saint on the U.S. Supreme Court, had to say was that if a regulation is purported to be to protect women's health, you have to prove it.
Right.
You can't just say it,
right.
As if my dad would say, saying it doesn't make it so. And that's basically what Ruth Ginsburg said. Saying it doesn't make it so, you're going to have to prove it. Right. And there is no proof, like in Texas, that admitting privileges improved patient safety. There's no proof, there's no data whatsoever that transfer agreements do anything to improve patient safety, because in the rare case that there is an emergency, where someone needs to be transferred to a hospital critically, what do? You call 911.
Right.
And who decides where the patient goes? The ambulance.
Right.
So, this is a completely separate issue from patient safety that has really, really been twisted around.
Right. And those were the sort of questions this morning that we heard from the justices. They were asking both sides, what about this idea of just calling 911? And the state, they don't like that. They won't accept that as a a rational idea of how you would handle an emergency. So, I think it's just like we were discussing earlier. Oral arguments in a Supreme Court case are virtually impossible to read as to how how the justices are actually thinking. I gotta say though, the presentation from Jennifer Branch this morning, she pretty much left it all out on the field. She did what needed to be done.
If they follow the law, if they do what's right, they will push back the state and say that this is wrong, and they will let this clinic stay open.
Right.
I hope that they can rise above whatever biases they may have and do that.
They just need to agree with the lower court decision,
Just like that.
Just like that. That's what'll happen. So
yeah, we're very optimistic about it. So
right. The scary side is that if the court does not side with the clinic, this is the last step. There is no appeals process beyond this. We don't know exactly what that would mean in terms of how soon the clinic would have to shut down. Right. But if they side against the clinic, then that would mean that eventually the clinic is closing.
Unless.
Bum, bum, bum.
Hi, Randy Ostra. This is Kellie Copeland at NARAL. You could be a hero today and sign the transfer agreement for the hospital so that they could stay open and this case would be moot. Hundreds of people who support NARAL have called you and asked you to do this.
Absolutely.
You can do it. It's just sign your name. Doesn't cost you anything.
Nothing.
So we'll be talking to you more, Randy, at a future date.
I love that voice.
Yeah. See, you frame this as him being the hero. I think there's another. Hey, Randy, this is a crappy position that you didn't ask to be put in, but John Kasich stuck you there. You can remove yourself by simply signing the transfer agreement, and then the clinic will keep dealing with the state.
I feel like my case is more compelling. Who doesn't want to be a hero?
Either way, we don't care what your reasoning is.
Sign it.
Hey, Randy, just sign the agreement.
Right.
Do it.
No cost, no obligation.
Absolutely.
I'll bring you a pen.
Okay, so that is that's what's going on in the Supreme Court. So we don't know exactly when that decision comes down. My understanding is the justices pretty much have their own timeline on how long they want to take, deliberate amongst themselves, write their decisions. Sometime within this judicial calendar session.
Yeah, could be a month, could be longer, could be shorter.
You never know. Kind of just got to keep your eyes and ears open.
Right. Could be tomorrow. We don't know. So,
oh God, please not tomorrow. Unless it's good.
Right.
Tomorrow's fine if it's good.
Tomorrow's busy.
Yeah.
Because we're still not done with today. This afternoon, in 2 hours, we're going to be over at the State House for the third hearing for the Down syndrome abortion ban. This is Senate Bill 164, right?
Yes.
And so this is our chance to explain why this is a bad piece of legislation. Kellie, you're going to be testifying.
Yeah. Our usual policy expert, Jamie Miracle, is not in the state, so you're stuck with me. It's been a while since I've testified, but this is a really easy thing to talk about. What they're trying to do with this legislation is they're trying to say that if a person has a diagnosis of Down syndrome in their pregnancy, that it would be a felony for a doctor to knowingly provide them with abortion care if that was part of their decision. And like a lot of things, it sounds like, oh, well, that's just all it is. That's not all it is. It is a pre-viability abortion ban that is designed to challenge Roe versus Wade, which is a Supreme Court ruling that legalized abortion. And if they can challenge that at what they think is the right time, right, and they can overturn Roe versus Wade, they can outlaw all abortions. So whether it's the Down syndrome ban or any of the, the 20-week ban that they passed, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The material differences in them are irrelevant in terms of their goal. They all have the same goal, which is to outlaw all abortions for everyone all the time.
Absolutely.
This is just one other strategy. It's like they're kind of setting, if you will, kind of a buffet in front of the U.S. Supreme Court to say, well, if you like this one, you could do it this way, or if you like that one, you could do it that way. And they're giving them as many options as possible to roll back or overturn Roe versus Wade and abortion access. I think the other thing that really people need to focus in on with this particular ban is that it would require, it could require doctors to have to ask their patients why. And then the state possibly collecting that information and using that to further stigmatize abortion and to say, well, your abortion's okay if you're doing it for this reason, but not that reason or this reason. And I think it really puts the legislature in the exam room between doctors and patients.
Absolutely.
In a completely inappropriate way.
Yeah, and the legislature should not be anywhere in there, in
No.
the room at all. This should be between the doctors and the patients, talking about what's best for them, their families, what's best for that woman's body, etc.
Right. I mean, how does any member of the legislature know what's best for any person who might face these decisions in Ohio? And, it is, if you do have an unintended pregnancy, if you do have a pregnancy where complicated issues arise and you are faced with those decisions, those are decisions that you should make.
Absolutely.
As the woman experienced them with consultation from your doctor, without political interference. I mean, talk to who you want. If you're a person of faith, talk to your clergy person.
Absolutely.
If you're in a relationship and you want to talk to your partner, if you want to talk to your physician, those are all appropriate things. But the decision has to rest with the woman. And this says now the decision has to rest with the state legislature.
Absolutely. Because, the woman is the one who has to carry this baby, has to have the final say, has to deliver this baby, and just deal with all the things that come with that. So whether or not she's able to do that or willing to do that, that's ultimately going to be based on her circumstances.
Right.
So there's just no other way to put that. It still just baffles my mind that this is even okay.
Well, and if this really was about people with Down syndrome, they wouldn't be banning a procedure. They would be doing things to help people and families who have Down syndrome, which frankly, this state government has done the opposite.
Absolutely. Right. Which is why this makes no sense, because you won't help us when the child is here, but it's not okay for us to decide to have an abortion.
Right. Well, I learned, I've been in this job for 15 years. And one of the things I learned early on was if you're going to expect things to make sense at the State House, you're going to be disappointed a lot. Which is the challenge when we go testify.
Absolutely.
Because, we have to try to bring them to their senses.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
You'll be testifying. We also received a written testimony from a couple parents who contacted us and have contacted the committee chairman to say, hey, we don't support this. So the first here is David Perry. One of these is somebody you might know. One of these is somebody you won't. David Perry is a freelance writer. He tweets a lot. Lollardfish is his Twitter handle. We'll throw it in the show notes. You might have seen him on Twitter because he writes mostly about disability rights. And he contacted us and wrote a piece for CNN, actually, 2 years ago when this bill was first introduced. So this is the second 2-year General Assembly that we're having to oppose this piece of legislation. So he wrote testimony to be submitted to the committee today. I've got it here in advance. He says, I am the father of a boy with Down syndrome and am opposed to Senate Bill 164. This bill will not lower rates of abortion following a prenatal diagnosis, nor will it help people with Down syndrome. The best way to prevent abortions after a prenatal diagnosis is to make the words Down syndrome less scary. This bill will make it harder, even criminal, to talk about Down syndrome and abortion.
I think it speaks volumes that somebody who actually has a child with Down syndrome to speak out against this bill. Like I said, it speaks volumes to just let you know that the people who actually are dealing with this, they have a valid opinion versus those who have never even had to deal with anything of this nature.
Right. Yeah. A far more valid opinion than I have.
Absolutely. I agree. All of us here.
Right. He says the Down syndrome community broadly supports nonpartisan pro-information legislation, which is what you just said. We want parents who get a diagnosis to get the best possible information. Criminalizing abortion based on a prenatal diagnosis will just make it harder to talk about these issues.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's like you're now stigmatizing Down syndrome.
Right.
But of course, that's not the goal. They just want to outlaw all abortions. They don't really care about this issue.
Right.
Yeah.
We also have testimony from a dad named Barry Rosenberg. He lives currently in Texas, but he's from Cincinnati.
I love how the dads are actually speaking up.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to point that out. I think that's pretty amazing.
The dads. Mr. Rosenberg. So this is, this is just a parent who saw this and was, opposed to it. He says that he has a son with Down syndrome. We knew early on about our son's condition. We had a choice and we decided to keep our son. That was a very tough decision for my wife and me, but I am glad we had such a choice. This enabled us to truly embrace what was coming our way versus feeling that this was being forced upon us by some unknown legislators.
Such a good point.
Yeah. I mean, that sums it up.
Yeah. He says children with Down syndrome are sometimes born with severe heart conditions, hearing problems, eyesight concerns, and many other medical issues that need financial assistance. My child attends an early education development school, which costs over $12,000 a year. Over 50% of the students within my son's school need some type of financial aid. It's now been proven that by working with children with Down syndrome from 18 months to 6 years old, that they can mainstream into a more traditional learning environment and become productive members of the community. So, I mean, he's very supportive as a parent. They're doing everything they can, but they acknowledge, and the first legislator to introduce this bill said in her testimony, not every parent is equipped to raise a child with Down syndrome. And we're all for increased resources, education,
Absolutely.
information about testing accuracy. These were all the points that were being made against, against abortion rights. But none of these things should justify removing the ability
Absolutely.
of, a woman and her family to make that decision for themselves.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
So that testimony, along with our terrific Ms. Copeland here, is going
Absolutely.
to
Stay tuned for that.
be in front of the Ohio Senate Health Committee.
Coming your way, fellas and gals.
Yes. So we'll be done with Tuesday, and that brings us to Wednesday. And Wednesday we come back and we listen to the same crap all over again. Not that yours is crap, theirs is crap.
Yeah, it'll be sponsor testimony in
Right.
the House, because if one bill is good, two bills are even better.
No, that's not how it works.
No.
House
Very
Bill
confusing.
121 is also the Down syndrome abortion ban. There's a version in the House and a version in the Senate. Both can't pass. It's stupid for them to have dueling bills.
Right.
It's not like they meet in the middle. You have to have one,
Sword fight.
pass both the House and the Senate. So tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., we'll be in Ohio House Health Committee listening to sponsor testimony and another legislator explaining why he feels that he should get to remove the rights of a woman to make up her own mind.
So looking forward to that.
Right?
It's mansplaining.
Yep. And that's not the only bill that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
We're probably going to see this fall the return of the abortion method ban, which was when we brought out our handmaids this past spring, which were very successful in getting some attention. But as this bill moves forward, we're really going to get into the substance of discussing exactly why the abortion method ban is such a terrible piece of legislation. That won't be it, though, because we've heard early rumors that Representative Ron Hood, previously a 6-week ban sponsor, and Nino Vitale are now proposing a brand new piece of legislation. It's a total abortion ban.
Because why not?
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
I think these guys are like, hey, let's just stop the shenanigans.
Yeah.
Let's just tell the people
Let's
what
just-
we want.
Just go for the jugular, like right there.
Yeah, it's another terrible dish on the buffet being put forward.
Right.
Let's see. Let's look at this thing. So they're looking for co-sponsors now. So if you're in the legislature, this is your big chance. If you want to do things like create a whistleblower provision to encourage people to investigate possible abortions. I mean, I don't even know what that's going to mean. Is that going to be like your miscarriage? Is this bill going to be so broad that it's going to outlaw your IUD or other contraception?
Right.
Until we see the language, we don't know. But based on similar measures that have cropped up in other ways, we faced a total abortion ban back in 2006. A lot of people don't remember that.
Right.
And that one even included a travel ban that said if you help someone go to another state to get an abortion, even if you didn't know, it was a felony. And I was like, well, all the bus drivers and pilots are going to be thrilled to hear that. So I think this is, so we're going to have a 6-week ban. We're going to have a total ban. We're going to have a method ban. We have a Down syndrome ban. All of them have the same goal. It doesn't matter which one it is. They all ultimately have the same goal, and they should all be voted down.
Right. Yeah. This is very similar to some ballot initiatives that we've seen proposed and failed here in Ohio. Not failed because they got a vote, so they couldn't even qualify for the ballot.
But failed in Colorado, other states.
Mississippi
absolutely.
voted one down. I mean, Mississippi voted this idea down. Stop and think about that for a minute. The people of Mississippi are opposed to
wait, hold on.
These total abortion bans. Because these sort of pieces of legislation, they do, as you were saying, they broaden out into things. And we haven't seen the language for this, so we're not commenting on exactly what it would do, but similar proposals would impact IUDs, would impact in vitro fertilization. That there's some big, wide complications that may be intended, may be unintended. We don't know, but none of them are good. And none of their reasoning justifies removing access to a safe and legal medical procedure.
Yeah, and the sponsors of this bill say that if it passes, any abortion would be considered aggravated murder, in case you were wondering.
Right.
So I hope you're going to build lots more prisons for that.
Yeah, I just read today that the overdoses, I believe, are up maybe around 88%. But I guess that's not important, though,
The opioid crisis.
Yeah, we're just going to introduce a bunch of abortion bans and overlook the real tragedies that are happening here in our state.
Seems easier.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, seems logical, I guess.
Your taxpayer dollars at work. Yeah. I was just thinking, I was like, and you're paying for this.
Right. So this week's Walk of Shame goes to Ron Hood and Nino Vitale for their total abortion ban.
Shame.
You suck.
So that is the stuff that we're working on.
Oh, God. Maybe next week we'll be a little bit more upbeat, have a lot more to say. Sorry.
That's going to happen.
We don't make the news, we just report it, right?
Right.
No, we make the news.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Kellie's right.
I'm here to tell you that with your support out there in pro-choice Ohio land, we make the news, and your support makes a difference. And
absolutely.
The fact, frankly,
and we need it.
Oh, desperate. I mean, the fact that the Down syndrome ban and the method ban, I mean, we've been fighting these things for several years now.
It's never ending.
That means that they weren't able to steamroll. We were able to put up barriers and stop this stuff, and we'll continue to do that.
Absolutely, because that's not going to stop them from trying or continuing to introduce these bills. So
yeah, Gabe and I, we both did a stint in the labor movement, and they, when you're on strike, they have a saying that you'll stay stronger one day longer, and that goes here too.
Yes. Okay, so it's time for Let's Get It On.
Let's get it on.
Where we talk about what we're doing and the upcoming calendar. Before we go to upcoming stuff, I want to look back. You were at, sorry, I'm throwing an audible here. You were at Akron's Family Black Pride this weekend.
It was so awesome.
This is the first time it's ever happened. Can you tell What is this?
It was amaze balls. They had free food all day, and I mean good food.
Now you tell me.
Okay. There was fish and chips. There was hamburgers, hot dogs.
Nice.
There was potato salad and baked beans. It was like a big Black gay family reunion.
Nice.
It was awesome. The music was incredible. They had groups that did traditional African dance and drumming. They had reggae music. They had line dancing.
Wow,
It was
of course.
all day. It started actually with a church service. My
Nice.
church, disclaimer, First Grace United Church of Christ. We're pro-choice.
Come visit.
Yeah. Krause Elementary, Sunday, 10:45. See, Bob, that's my pastor.
That's so
He may
funny.
be listening. But we had
Shout
a
out.
wonderful service, great gospel singers, and then
Nice.
Equality Ohio and Care Source and Planned Parenthood and the Barber College was there giving free
Great group of
haircuts.
crowd.
We love the Barber College. They do so
Nice.
much charity work in Akron. And Karen Williams, very famous comedian, was there. It was a fantastic day. And I just had a ball. We had so much support for our petitions in support of abortion access, gave away lots of free condoms and buttons
Nice.
separately. Always make sure they're different parts of the table.
You know what? The pins and the balloons together.
No, sir. And we just had a ball. And, I want to thank Steve Arrington and the Akron AIDS Collaborative and others who put together that first annual event. And I can't wait to go back next year. It was a great
Yes,
time.
I can't wait to be there next year.
Yeah, I
Couldn't
know,
do it
because you
this
didn't get
year.
to be there this
No.
year.
I thought
Yeah,
I was
Lisa, me.
having a birthday party for my son, whose birthday was that same day, but my daughter got sick, so there was no birthday party. I know.
Meanwhile, I'm out there eating
Exactly.
fish
Don't
and,
tell me again. Oh
and
my
line
gosh.
dancing. But, could have been you.
Will there be video of the
Oh my
line dancing
gosh.
for the show notes?
No.
No.
Okay.
I hope not.
Well, that sounds like a terrific event.
Absolutely.
Upcoming in the calendar on September 20th, if you're in the Youngstown area, we hardly ever get out there.
But we will start. So
Yes.
get ready.
Youngstown, you're going to have a microphone training, which is me and Annie Kroll, who'll be just back from the European
France.
Grand Tour. So this is a training that we've done in many other communities across Ohio. It's going to be 2 hours in the evening on the 20th, a good discussion of legislation that we've battled in the past, legislation that we're tackling currently, court decisions that have affected how clinics are able to legally operate. Again, both past court decisions and current ones, and then just ways to discuss reproductive rights, abortion care, ways to write letters to the editor to talk about these, write an op-ed to your local newspaper. It's kind of difficult to get published in the Columbus Dispatch, but there's the Delaware Gazette, and all of these other little papers, the Youngstown Vindicator.
And people read those.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Warren Tribune, Chronicle.
Yeah. So we'll work with people to write their own letters to the editor and draft their own message in their own words, but to prepare it to be published in your local newspaper. Or if you have questions about what it's like to call into talk radio to discuss an issue on the air.
I love talk radio so much.
It's great that people do those. It's even better when they do it following a messaging training and they can learn exactly how to discuss these issues as informed citizens.
So is this a training just for volunteers, or can anybody come and join, even if they want to do a letter to the editor as a one-time thing?
Yeah, it's for anybody. If you're listening to this,
Absolutely.
then you are eligible to come. So it's for pro-choice people. When we have this messaging training, we're not looking to convince people. These are for people who already understand the importance. They might
Right.
not, they might like, increased access for birth control. Maybe
Yeah.
they have questions about abortion.
Absolutely.
That's fine. We're not hosting like a debate on should abortion
Right.
be legal. That's not what this is. This is for people who, like you said, they don't have to be established volunteers. You don't have to have been canvassing or phone banking or doing something with us. This can be your first time coming out to a microphone training to learn how to talk about these issues. If you already understand, that you care about it, or if you have a friend that where maybe they're always talking about abortion rights and you want to learn more about it, this is a great spot for that. So this one will be in Youngstown, September 20th. Link to sign up is going to be in the show notes. And we do these periodically in cities around the state. So if you have a group of friends and you're like, oh, well, we all support this and we all feel the same way, give us a call. We'll be very happy normally to reserve a room in a local library. Come on over to your neck of the woods, have this training a couple hours. It's a nice small gathering, get together. People can ask questions in a safe space and get some informed answers.
And I think the reason why this is so important is that this is how we bust abortion stigma.
Yeah.
That we talk about our values, that we talk about, if you're a person of faith and you're pro-choice, talk about that. If you're someone who, has faced difficult pregnancy decisions and you want to talk about that, talk about that. I think that forcing women to feel like they have to be ashamed, that they have to keep these things secret, is the foundation for all of the attacks on our rights. And the more we talk about things, the more people know that they know someone. I mean, I guarantee you, with the number of women who have had abortions in this country, you know someone and you probably love someone who's had an abortion.
Absolutely.
But you may not know it because they haven't talked about it. Or maybe they don't know that you're a safe person to talk to. I always tell people when they come to work here, one of the first things I tell people is people are going to start telling you their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. They want someone to talk to.
Yeah, because now they know, okay, Vashitta is a safe person I can talk to.
Absolutely.
That's important. Women need to know that they're not alone, that what they're doing isn't wrong, and that we have their back and we support them.
Right.
Very good message.
And we're going to have other future events. People can get information about that by email, and you can sign up for our emails by going to prochoiceohio.org. And there's a button there for, sign up for more information. You put in your email and boom, you're on the list.
Yeah, things are about to get real interesting, folks. So get on that email list if you're not already.
Absolutely. And if you want to volunteer, go ahead and do the same process. Get on our website, let us know, and we'll be happy to talk to you, train you, whatever you may want to do. So.
And if you don't do that, there's still the phone, 1-800-GO-NARAL.
Twitter at ProChoiceOH, and just search for NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio on Facebook.
We're everywhere.
Yeah, we're trying. So
come find us.
Okay, you ready to head over to the State House and testify?
Let's get ready to rumble.
You'd be skipping.
Leaving on a high note.
Woot, woot.
Okay, so good luck. And
I don't need luck.
I love this woman.
Okay.
I love you.
We'll see everybody next week.
I love you too.
Bye.
Bye.